Yeah, I see people are starting to get into the chat. Hello, everyone. We'll be starting at like 12:30-ish, but this is my first time using Zoom webinar. We had more people than anticipated, so thought it would be easier to use this. If you guys have any questions, you can go into the Q&A and ask questions. I'll put it in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function. Also, if you want to like message me or anything, you can also in theory use the Q&A function to touch on something or to add a resource that I can post in the chat for everyone. So John, have you been sleeping well, like with the baby and everything, or it's just been all over the place?
I mean, I've been sleeping more than Natalie has.
That's
She gets like 2 hours of sleep. It's a lot. But no,
yeah.
she's pretty good. She lets me sleep a little bit more, which is very helpful. But you know, you get kind of used to it after a while.
Yeah. For everyone in the chat, John has a newborn baby, so this plus coronavirus pandemic leads to a unusual sleep schedule.
Yeah, to say the least.
Cool. So it's 12:30. I think we'll get started now, and I'm sure more people will start joining in. But I think, first off, John, thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate it. For those who, just so you guys have background on me and sort of these conversations, my name's Ari Lewis. I decided to do these series of webinars. This is our fourth now. And the idea is really to help build and scale personal brands. So sort of, throughout this coronavirus pandemic, I think, people not being able to, network, go out, they're looking for new ways to sort of, stand out. And I decided to do these series of webinars to help people with that. So, today I invited my good friend John on to the webinar series. John, to me, is one of the most connected people I know and really taught me a lot about, networking and making friends and really adding value in relationships. I think where John's really interesting is that, every conversation he has with people, he really makes you feel like, you're one of the most important people he knows. And he just is so good at, building those relationships individually with people. So I'm gonna, turn it over to John, and John's gonna, give us his background and sort of, we'll start the conversation from there. As I said, maybe beginning, which some of you might not have heard yet, this is Zoom webinar. So it's a new platform that I'm using with Zoom. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A function, so just feel free to add them. Also, if you want to post like some type of resource or something, or you have something else you want to tell me, feel free to put it in the Q&A function, and then I can put it in the Zoom webinar chat. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thank you. Yes, so I run a team over at Fortis Lux. We are a financial planning and financial services team. I've been in the industry for about 12 years now. I've worked at some big companies. I've run my own independent shop. So I've seen a little bit of both the good and the bad of every type of platform out there. And, over the years, we've built the entire business off of introductions and referrals. We never were a cold calling shop. We never, we never did any cold marketing or mailers. And so over the years, that's helped us be, I think, very creative and a little bit different than a lot of other people in our space, which has kind of led to where we are today and kind of where I wanted to be to, kind of chat about it.
Yeah, so I think, a lot of people, whether it's a product company or a professional services business, they always talk about referrals, right? So, oh, I get 100% of my business through referrals, or, a lot of my business stems from referrals. And, I think when people are starting a company, they're like, what does that mean? How do you get to that point? So, for you, what I'd love for you to touch on is, when you start meeting people, especially beginning to build that relationship, what are some of the things you ask so that it's a meaningful relationship, and starting on a good foundation. Many people, I think, unfortunately sometimes think so transactionally.
Yep.
So I'll have conversations with people, and it's like, what can you do for me, or you know like, what am I getting out of this? And they're
Right.
not playing the long game. So can you touch on that?
No, definitely. So well, the last thing you said is probably the most important thing is that we always focus on the long game, and every relationship that I have is always focused on that. And what that means is that it means that I put the person first, and how can I help them? How can I understand what's going on? And it's not just about listening to what their potential issue is or concern is and solving that problem, but it's more of just being present and having empathy with what's going on in their world. And what I've learned is that when you go to these people, when you go to different people, whether it's clients or people you're trying to network with, and you understand the challenges that are going on in their world, everyone, any type of professional service business, everyone pretty much has a lot of the similar issues, if not the exact same issues, just in a little bit different ways. And what you do is just get to understand what those things are. Everyone's always asking about, they need more clients or they want more clients. Well, what I've tried to do over the years is be a little different, understand, how's technology affecting your business? Where do you see the business in 10 years or in 5 years? And you just start asking questions when you're speaking with people, and you'll see their reactions to those questions be very different, because they're not expecting it. They're expecting you to be like, they're expecting the question to have a meaning of, what can you do? What can it do for you? Instead of it being a question of, what can it do for them? And that's just really helped, I think, us build some of the relationships over the years with the people that we do business with.
Yeah, so you talked about, empathy, and also, asking about, how you can be helpful for them. And especially, you're talking about, like, how's technology affecting your business? Where do you see your business in 5, 10 years? Which I think are great questions, because they sort of show that you're trying to build that long-term relationship. You're not like, oh, what is someone else offering you now? Like, how can I make that, a better offering in the immediate future? So when you're thinking about, asking questions, and building building those relationships and showing that empathy, how are you framing those questions? So, you just get introduced to someone new who's considering your services. What are the questions, you're trying to ask? And also, how personal do you get? One of the things that I think, people maybe shy away from, because they don't want to combine those personal and professional lives. But I think do really well is, the next time you see someone, you go, hey, how are your children doing? Or like, oh, I remember when we spoke last, your children played soccer, how's this team doing? And that really helps build those personal connections. So thinking about those things, what is your approach to doing
Well,
that?
I think one of the ways that I like to get very personal, and not to be intrusive, but I like to be present in conversations. I like to be present with people. So, I'm not going to just ask them a question of how's their wife, how are their kids. I want to really know those things. And then after that conversation, I'm going to take down notes. I use a couple of different dictating apps to take down notes on people that I speak with, because those things are important to me. I speak to so many people throughout a day or a week that I don't have time to remember everyone that I speak to, unfortunately. So I have to write down notes, otherwise I'll forget. But one of the things that you hit on was, how do I frame those questions? A lot of times I'll get personal, is that because I'll use personal experiences in my life. And I might hear something, or I'll talk about my wife, or I'll talk about my kids, I'll talk about my family. And I'm not afraid to use the good, the bad, and the ugly in my life, because it's my family, it's my life, and it is what it is. And I've noticed that, especially when I'm speaking with clients and I'm speaking to people that I want to do business with, if I can be real to them and I can be open to them, you know, they feel their guard comes down because I'm not trying to sell them anything. I mean, and that's really been successful. I started doing that probably in the last 5 years, and we saw a huge uptick in our business as a result. And it was just something we stumbled upon. We didn't do it strategically.
And sort of, getting some questions in the chat to follow up on that, and without getting into, because I know a lot of people with like CRMs and with tracking contacts, there's, all these personal preferences, but on a more general, sense, how do you go about like tracking contacts and thinking about, how to organize it? Is it like, I haven't spoken to this person in 6 months, I'm going to speak to them? Is it like, oh, this is a prospective lead? What if it's someone who's like, I think there might be business there, I don't know, like, how do you sort of go about knowing, hey, when do I want to touch base with someone? How do I make sure those conversations also are organic in nature? One of the things for me that I started doing, that I read from a book, Never Eat Alone. I don't know how many in the chat have read that book. A book I recommend is, I got everyone's birthday when I met them. And then I would always say happy birthday on their birthday. And that was just a very organic way of touching base with people. But, what are things that you do both so that it's organic and natural?
Yeah, so I mean, we do a couple of different things. It's still something that we try to improve all the time, because I'm nowhere near perfect with it. But we use a CRM system. I use two different ones, but I use the CRM system just to kind of track what's happening with people, and then I use it really as a reminder to see when I have, really when was the last time I've spoken to them. I segment my CRM system so that it's organized, where I know certain topics, if they come up, I'm going to want to reach out to someone. So, for example, if I've got a business owner and everything that's going on in the world happens, they're going to get all of our content talking about the SBA loans and the PPP loans and the economic disaster loans. At the same time, individuals who I know that are, let's say close to retirement or that have assets under management with us, we'll send them different content. And then, even just, I do it with friends and just people that I network with that we've never earned money together. We just, we segment them to have different conversations, whether it's sometimes you and I will share information about soccer and we'll just see an article and we'll send. It's just, I wish I had a better system for a lot of it. A lot of it is just, it's kind of stuck up in here, and you just figure out, you know what, this would be a good time to go reach to someone. From a business perspective, I really recommend just using a CRM system, because it's the most efficient way to get the data out as fast as possible.
What CRM, someone asked in the chat, that you use?
So we recently just, we switched over to Salesforce recently for all of our assets under management clients. For a lot of the pipeline, to manage our pipeline, we use another CRM system called Less Annoying CRM, which I highly recommend, because it's the funniest name in the world and it's really inexpensive. So I also own a property and casualty business, and we use Less Annoying CRM for that business. It was already built out. Salesforce is great. Salesforce to me is a little bit too complicated to do certain simple tasks, but it's for our compliance reasons, we have to use Salesforce on our investment business.
Got it. Okay, awesome. And so another question from the chat is, when you're building relationships, and I don't know if this is something that you necessarily encounter, but I assume, you'll probably have good advice from others. When people are building relationships and maybe it conflicts with someone else in your business. So like, your partner knows this guy, but he wants to buy from you, not from your partner. How do you sort of manage those relationships when people are territorial? And, I think that unfortunately happens at businesses where, the work culture isn't as great as others, but what suggestions do you have for sort of, managing those relationships and making sure that, you aren't stepping on someone's feet, or say you're a junior person going into a more senior role, and, someone has that seniority over a relationship?
Yeah, I mean, see, it's a great question. It's a little difficult to answer because people have different approaches with it, and I think the way you handle that is the way you handle your personality. For me, I always have a saying: I'd rather get 50% of something than get 0% than 100% of nothing. So all the people that we bring into our team that we do business with have similar feelings with it. If we feel as we're doing business with someone that they're going to be counting pennies and they're going to be very territorial about those things, we might do business with them, but it's not really going to expand to where, where we're collaborating with them. We might just be networking with them. We might get some clients from them, and that's fine, but we're not collaborating. So like one of the things that we try to do is with all the people that are in our network is we want to go further than just get clients or get them to give us clients. So, my advice would be is just, make sure you structure a good deal for yourself. Taking a piece of something that you don't have to, look, sometimes if you're going to bring a more senior person a case or an opportunity and you don't have to work, but you can make 20%, 30% on the case, well, you know what? You just made yourself a 20, 30% profit margin. That's in any business, that's a home run. So you just have, again, that's a part of looking at the long run. And sometimes you got to just take your wounds along the way.
Yeah, it's great. I really, really appreciate that. So, one of the things that, I've touched on a lot in these conversations is, starting to build the brands, build yourself as a brand, really thinking of yourself as a brand.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people, they're very afraid to step out of their comfort zone. I think one of the things that, you've done very well is sort of, you have no problem reaching out to whoever and trying to figure out ways to make things work. You're really fearless in your approach, I guess would be a good way to put it.
Thank you.
What suggestions do you have for people who, maybe they're afraid to step out of their comfort zone, they're afraid to make that call to someone, or try to build that relationship because that person's just, maybe they're intimidating to them. It's a much more senior person or something like that. What suggestions do you have?
Well, the first one is I think the first suggestion I would have is look, it takes time, it takes practice. Practice on people that won't say no. So sometimes, like for example, in my business, some of the best people that we use to practice things on, if you want to say, is wholesalers. Because wholesalers are so desperate for our business that we'll just go to them and just start having a conversation, or we'll try different.
Wait, sorry to interrupt. Can you just tell people what a wholesaler is? I'm not actually familiar with it either.
Sure, yeah. So a wholesaler is someone who works for a big insurance company or a big investment firm, and they'll go to advisors like us, and they want them to give us business. So they'll try to pitch their products. And what ends up happening in our industry is that no one has any respect for them for a lot of times because they just know they're trying to get business. So we'll practice different networking techniques. So if you're nervous about asking someone personal questions and you think they might get offended by it, try on people that or like that if the relationship goes south, you have nothing to worry about. So I would just say that in general, it's, you try to overcome that the best you can in your personal routes, or partner up with someone who is more of a marketing person who's not afraid to go have those conversations to help build your brand, build your business.
Got it. And then we got another question from the chat. So how do you prioritize, your business development efforts? So, one of the things that this person's asking is, you're focusing on different clients, different people, how do you know, okay, this person's, really good. I should be speaking to them, or, this person, I don't know, like, how do you decide, who you want to speak to? And how do you also make sure that you don't get bogged down in sort of endless conversations that aren't going anywhere, where, okay,
Yeah.
you're trying to prioritize this one conversation, but it just doesn't feel like it's going anywhere.
Well, one of the first things that I do, and I have a a mentor who helped me with this, is I build what we call a model work week. So inside of a model work week, I only do certain tasks during certain time periods. So that helps me not get bogged down in certain conversations because, I sometimes have to tell people, I say, look, I'd love to talk more, but I have to hold the integrity of my calendar. Like I have a conference call, I have an appointment, I have to be somewhere, like I have to do that. So that helps with those conversations. How to prioritize, who to speak to and when to speak to them, I think comes to the calendar because, I block off certain hours of the day that I only speak to clients. I won't speak to other advisors. I won't speak to people that we network with. I just speak to clients. So that helps manage my day where I don't go a full day and be like, wow, I was really busy today, but I didn't do anything that was revenue producing. So my recommendation is to put a schedule in your calendar and stick to it. Hold yourself accountable to it because it'll help you not get boggled down in those details.
And sort of on that note of, measuring success and measuring success as you build your network, build, have these conversations. I think one of the things that, many people, and it goes back to this transactional approach that I think many people take is, oh, it's so much easier to measure a transaction, right? So I speak to someone and I made a sale. So I could say, hey, this conversation resulted in, $100 or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you measure the success of those longer term conversations where, it's someone who you're building a relationship with and you should invest time in it? How do you sort of say, okay, this is worth my time, this isn't worth my time? Because I think that's something that, I struggle with. I'm sure others in the webinar struggle with, of knowing, okay, I know I should speak to this person, but I don't know how to measure it. And
Yeah.
society
Well,
drives us towards those measurements. So how do you,
yeah. It's a tough one. No, it's a tough one because this is where you have to kind of dehumanize the business. And the way that we've kind of been able to cope with that is, I look at my time as a billable hour. So for me, it's not just like like how I judge who I'm going to speak with clients and when I'm not going to speak with clients. Excuse me. It's more of like when am I going to be working and when am I going to be spending time with my family. Like everything has a billable hour. So that's an important thing for me because I know what my billable hour is. So for me, if I'm not going to be earning that like X amount of dollars per hour, it may not be worth my time. Now, where it gets difficult is does that do you get paid today? Do you get paid in the future? Do you get paid 10 years from now? It really depends. I mean, my first ever client in the business 12 years ago, I probably made less than I probably made like around $150 off of at the time. I haven't made a dollar since, but I continue to speak with her. I continue to help with her. And she's introduced me to probably 30 clients over the years. So, and then on the flip side, you'll also learn about some people that you'll be able to tell if they're wasting your time or not. And it doesn't mean you exclude them, but maybe what you do is you let them be for 3 months, 6 months. Then you come back to them and say, hey, we haven't spoken in a while. What's going on? How are things going? And you can start to evaluate it from there.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I think, I guess on that note too, people who, are, for lack of a better word, a waste of time, how do you sort of also deal with those people, especially when they're only asking things of you and they're not returning? Is there a point when you go like, hey, I don't think this relationship is meaningful? I think for a lot of folks, they sort of, have these people in their business lives and maybe even in their personal lives where the relationship is parasitic in nature. I'll even sometimes speak to friends on a personal level where like they feel like, hey, they just tell me about these issues or these problems. So like, I don't get anything from them. Like that's not a real friendship. How do you sort of deal with that on both that personal and professional level?
Well, on the personal level, I mean, it was maybe probably about 15, yeah, like 10, 15 years ago, something like that happened where in my group of friends, we had one gentleman who just, that's what it felt like. And, we speak today, but we're nowhere near how close we were to back then. And, sometimes you just gotta have a conversation with them and see how they react to it. On the business side of things, I think it's a little bit different because it really depends on what's going on. So, typically where that's come up is where you may have given, like, I have a CPA that I'm very close with. I gave him probably close to 50 clients over the years. He's never given me one client. Now, most people would probably cut him off and not give him clients anymore. For me, I just told him, I called him up one day and I just told him, I said, look, I'm never going to ask you for a client again. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. You're still my accountant. He still does my taxes today. And I still refer him to people because he does a great job. I look at that as, you just kind of chalk it up. You have to make a business decision on what you're going to get and what you're not going to get out of it. It doesn't mean you still can't utilize it for your business and for what you're trying to achieve. It just means you have to go out and find a better relationship to obtain business from.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and my mom fairly well, but my mom always preaches, doing the right thing and pay dividends in the long run. For you, I guess, anecdotally speaking, have you felt that's been the case where sort of, there are people or there are things you've done where, it was just the right thing to do and like you didn't really see that value add if you looked at it from a transactional point of view, but it paid dividends in the long run? Does that happen a lot to you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we always try to do the right thing. I mean, I was actually on a phone call this morning with a new potential client where they came to us with a certain type of transaction, and I talked them out of doing that transaction. It wasn't that it was a bad decision for them. I just didn't think it was the best decision for them. If I didn't talk them out of it, I would have made about $25,000. But I know by talking them out of it, where I'm now going to make $0. I know it's the right thing in the long run. And that's just the way I built my business, where I know over the last 12 years, I could have made more money. I also know that I can go to bed at night and I never have to worry about that my clients are going to say something bad at me. And to me, that was more important. That was my moral compass I wanted to achieve. And where now, being in the business for as long as I am, our clients, they make introductions, but they make introductions, I just think, in a different way, where it's just like, look, talk to John, he's going to take care of you. It's not about talk to John, he's got some really fancy widget that he's going to sell you. And that was a big thing for me to build.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's really good. I guess also, so as you started, building your business, I think one of the things that you've prioritized is sort of these one-on-one conversations. And then for me, obviously, the way I do content creation is, I try to create for many and sort of, be in people's inboxes or things like this where, I'm communicating with a lot of people at once. How have you, I know you started to look into, okay, like email marketing, or how can I touch multiple people at once? How do you sort of, balance and for those out there of, hey, I think it's really important to like have these one-on-one conversations, but also how do oh, it's also good to, touch base with someone via, you talked about PPP loans. I'm going to send, 50 clients an update on PPP loan.
Yeah.
When do you know, okay, this is a good channel to do this versus, when do I want to do that one-on-one approach? And I guess for others, how do they start to figure out which channels work and which channels don't?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think my answer to that this pandemic would have been very different. One of the things that we've taken from this pandemic is how, we can we've started to do more group calls, not Zoom calls, but we just set up a conference line and we do a town hall and we just say, look, we're going to be on at this time for a half hour. Just come join us. And, we did one a couple of weeks ago of just when everything kind of started happening, with a bunch of business owner clients of ours. And we just said, look, we've got really no agenda. What are you guys all doing? How are you balancing laying someone off, the furloughing? How are you making these decisions? What are some things that you're seeing in your industry? So, we've got a guy who owns a bus company talking to a guy who owns a construction company. Normally they would never speak, but now they're crisscrossing ideas and resources. So we've just tried to be a calming voice. And I think with this pandemic, one of the things that it's told us is that those group settings, I never did as much, but we're going to start using them a lot more. I don't know if it's going to produce more revenue for us, but I know that the clients appreciated that content and those conversations, and just in such a unique way, because I don't know everything. And our whole concept is like, look, I know I have a huge community that'll help you get the answers that you need. So if I can bring those people together in a more open forum, why not do that?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I guess, on that note, from, the pandemic and sort of, the shift in business, what suggestions do you have for people, moving forward to help create, more sustainable, meaningful relationships in a post, COVID-19 world? Because I think, many people, it was, oh, let's go out for drinks, let's, get some to eat, whatever. And now it's, you think, a year from now, people are like, oh, let's jump on a Zoom call and do a virtual beer. Is it going to
Yeah.
be, let's do a Zoom call with a bunch of people and do a virtual meal? Like, what do you think it's going to look like? And how do you sort of, uh, suggest to people to approach those relationships post this pandemic?
Well, I think especially in today's world with what's going on, I think the biggest thing is if you can get on the phone and speak with people that you want to do business with, but not talk about business, and see how long you can go for, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, and then be done and close the phone call and not talk about business. People will look at you in such a different way after that phone call. They may not say it, but they will think it. So it's one of the things that we've tried to do is, and the other thing is be a calming voice. It's a very difficult time. People are in survival mode, but if you can be that calming voice to just help people through everything. I mean, look, I'm in a house. I have a small house. I have my wife. We've got a 3-year-old son and a newborn girl. Like, my wife, pretty much for 12 hours a day, speaks to a 3-year-old and a newborn. So a lot of times when her and I talk, I just let her vent of what's going on in her mind. For the people that you're doing business with, or the people that you want to do business with, it's a lot of the same stuff. They've been stuck at home. They're speaking to their spouse. They're speaking to their children, and they just want to talk to someone different. So if you can just be an open voice, and this is where empathy comes in, and if you can be present in that conversation and really listen, I think you'll see the relationships change in a way that you never expected.
And sort of, as we maybe begin to wrap up the conversation, when you think about things like empathy, things like, you know, building that natural relationship, what are resources that you've used to like learn about these things? Is this something that, you've just developed from trial and error? Have you done a good job of utilizing your network, which knowing you, I assume you have? Are there books you read, things that you recommend reading? What has your approach been there, and like how have you learned how to do those things?
A combination of all that. Probably the biggest change that I made about 5 years ago was the types of books that I was reading. I read a lot more psychology type books now, that I've just really fell in love with. It's become a bit of a hobby. One of the books that I think is unbelievable is called Beyond Reason. It's basically a guy who used to be a negotiator for the FBI, and he talks about how every conversation is a negotiation. So it's a book that I highly recommend, and I just think that it was a game changer for me. And so I've just spent a lot of time learning from that, and then I have other people in the industry and people that I respect their success, and I ask them questions. I'm not, one of the things that I'm not afraid of is I'm not afraid to ask someone to go out for a drink or ask them to get on a phone call, and I'll ask them a question, because what's the worst thing they're going to tell me? No. Like, it's just, I'll just know probably won't speak to them ever again after that. But, you know, so it's just, I'm very direct with people, and it's worked out well over the years.
Yeah, so someone asked in the chat, what was the name of the author for that book, Beyond Reason?
Let me check. I'm not, it is Roger Fisher.
Roger Fisher, got it. And what I guess what I was going to ask, that I'm drawing a blank on now that we said that Roger Fisher question, but I'm drawing a blank. So I guess I'll skip from that. You know, as we wrap things up, I wanted to ask, you know, if anyone else has any other questions, to please let me know. I'm trying to keep these chats to, you know, 45 minutes. So you know, another 5 to 10 minutes. But, you know, when you just talked about, man, I'm really drawing a blank on the question that I wanted to ask. I had it like on the tip of my tongue, and then it's gone. But someone else asked a different question. So as I think about the question I was going to ask, I'll let them ask it, and then go back to thinking about my question. What other books would you recommend on relationship building?
I think 12 Rules of Life by Jordan Peterson. That's another very good one. I'm a big fan of his. I just think I watch a lot of his talks and his YouTubes. I just think he's fascinating with the way he approaches things. So that's another good one. You know, pretty much any book by Simon Sinek. I think I've read them about 5 times, 6 times. So those are great. You know, Leaders Eat Last, I think is a very good one. Another book that's a little bit different is it's the what is it? You know, let me see. Hang on, I got my list of books here. Let me see if I can find it. It's the Starbucks book. I'm drawing up the Starbucks Experience by Joseph McKelly. That was a really interesting book, because it talks about all the psychology things that they did for Starbucks to give it the experience, and that was a really fascinating thing.
It's funny, now that I said I couldn't remember my question, all these people are asking questions in the chat. So another question is, you know, what advice would you have, you know, maybe 10 years ago when you looked at yourself that you'd give yourself now, knowing everything you've learned? You know, what are some of the biggest takeaways? And I guess, you know, also how you evolved as a person. You know, I always, in a lot of my conversations, you know, and you brought up the word empathy, I feel like I've become more empathetic over the years. But, you know, sort of what's that advice that you'd give yourself 10 years ago? You know, how have you changed from, you know, someone out of college to where you are now?
Well, 10 years ago, the first thing I would have done is, I met my wife 7 years ago. So I would have figured out a way to find my wife somehow in some way and go meet her 3 years earlier. She's had the biggest impact in my business. I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. Just for whatever the reason was, I wasn't in a good place mentally, and I struggled a lot because of it. So if I had to go back, I would talk to myself to be more confident in my abilities to communicate with people. That would probably be the number one thing. And I would try to go find her, because she doesn't support me because she's my wife. She supports me because she believes in me, and she tells me when I'm wrong, you know, which is, I need that more than, that's one of the biggest things that I needed, you know, not just someone to tell me that I'm right all the time. From a business side of things, I look back and I would have, I think, take more risk than I did. I think I was a little too conservative on certain business opportunities. And the second thing would be to focus on the things that drive revenue. All the other stuff you can figure out along the way. Focus on the things that make sales, that drive revenue, and everything else will just work itself out.
Yeah, it's funny that you talk about, driving towards revenue, because I think a lot of people, they're not thinking that way. They're thinking, oh, I have this idea and, whatever, and they start to build it out, and they're like, one of the biggest things is, will people pay you for it?
Well,
So
I mean, what I know a great example of that is like it's kind of like where you look at it and say, like I would spend so much time back years ago in trying to be an expert in all these different products that we offer. And now I just have the experts in each one of those different areas. And it goes back to working as a team and working together. And I make less money, but I now make more money because I'm going out and I focus on what I do really well and I leverage what other people do really well. So I don't have to be an expert in 30 different things.
yeah, no, that's very good. And I think, for me, my last question for you, before we wrap things up, and if anyone else has any other final questions, let me know, is, you talk about, not being an expert. One of the things that I preach in a lot of my writing and conversations, and I think some of the conversations we've had, is making sure, how do you settle on that niche? So for you, how have you in your conversations with people, sort of settled on, hey, this is what I want to be known for. This is like, you know, when people think, X, they think of me. What are the things that you've settled on to try to find that niche and develop that niche?
It's been well, it's been an evolving process. Over 12 years, that process has changed. The expertise has changed. You know, but right now, I think we've got a niche where, you know, I spend most of my time handling the relationship. I control the experience. I'm my client's personal CFO. That's the kind of the concept that we give to them, where I'm going to take everything in your world and I'm going to condense it and I'm going to make it very simple for you. And for our clients, it works out really well because they're so busy. They're running businesses. They're successful employees. They don't have time to worry about all these things. So, I think, when you're looking for that niche, find something that you love, find something you enjoy doing, and also find out what you don't enjoy doing about your business and find someone who loves doing that, because the things that you might hate, you might be able to partner up with someone and they absolutely love doing it.
Got it. Awesome. Well, John, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Next Wednesday, I will be having Jillian Smith join me. Jillian's a friend of mine who is a fantastic writer. She is really good at sort of helping people express ideas in written words. So, for those out there that are looking to, figure out how to sort of build their brand, with writing, I recommend it. And, you can continue to join me every Wednesday for this webinar series. Also, if you go on my website, aryalewis.com, feel free to read some of my essays. And yeah, until next Wednesday, I'll see you guys then. Thanks again, John.
Thanks. My pleasure.
Have a good one.